Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is the Lollipop and this is the Sizzlebk S320 electric cargo bike. Besides the fun name of this company, this bike has a lot of great features and comes in at a great price point. It goes 28 miles per hour, has a max range of 65 miles, has a huge rear rack space to hold a ton of cargo or passengers, has a perfect upright and comfortable seating position, and doesn't feel too heavy. So it sounds perfect, but this bike unfortunately has one major flaw that could be a deal breaker. So in this video, we're going to go over everything on this bike, from the unboxing and assembly process to all of the parts and components and my thoughts on all of those. And then I'll show you how it rides at the end when I give my final review. Now, before I get any further, I do want to say thank you to Sizzlebk for sending me this bike out for a review video. I'm not required to say anything good or bad about it, but I will do both. And I also grabbed a discount code for you guys watching. If you are interested in getting this bike after my review, just click on that link in the description below and enter the code TOLOLLIPOP for $100 off the bike, which is a pretty good discount considering the already low price. All right, let's jump right into this bike by talking about the unboxing and assembly process. The box itself is actually pretty small for an e-bike, which is nice since it's easier to work with. And part of the reason that's possible is because the bike comes without the suspension fork attached. So there's a trade-off there since you get a more compact package, but it makes the assembly take longer. And on that note, the biggest flaw with this bike, talking about it right away, is definitely the assembly process. You can see all the different parts the bike comes with laid out here, including the tools, charger, kickstand, etc. And I appreciate that we don't have to install the lights ourselves. And Sizzlebk does give you an instruction manual for how to assemble the bike, which is simple enough to follow. But it has a few sections that don't quite make sense, and even after following the instructions exactly, I still had several issues, which ultimately meant I spent 3 days assembling a bike that should only take a couple of hours to put together. For example, it says to bolt in the front fender from the back of the suspension fork, but when you do this, it bends the attachment point of the fender, and the bolt sticks out through the front of the frame, which just looks ugly. But if you attach it the way you do on most other e-bikes through the front, then the fender ends up looking a little wonky and doesn't exactly follow the curve of the tire. Not a big deal here since it still works, but the bigger problem was with the front suspension fork. This is a bolt-on axle in the front, and no matter what orientation I put the wheel and brake caliper in, the disc brake rotor would rub so hard against the brake pads and even against the actual mounting piece itself that the bike was not rideable. Okay, I removed the brake caliper, and even then, it still hits this right here, so this is too close. I eventually got this to work by taking the two washers that are supposed to go on the outside of the fork and instead putting them on the inside to add more space for the disc rotor to move away from the brake caliper, and then it worked perfectly. But this is not the ideal way to do this and not how it's supposed to go together per the instructions, so I may have gotten a defective part somewhere here. And while adjusting the drivetrain, the rear derailleur was rubbing hard against the gears in the freewheel, which made the bike unusable in certain gears. Normally this is an easy fix by adjusting the B tension screw on your derailleur, which essentially just pushes the derailleur down away from the gears. But this lower end derailleur doesn't even have that basic B tension screw, so I had to research what to do, find random online Reddit posts about it, and ultimately I removed the shift cable, removed the housing surrounding the cable, cut everything shorter, and reinstalled it so the cable housing would actually move the derailleur down a little bit more. And that fixed the problem. And on top of that, the cable itself was frayed, so I poked myself a couple of times and had to cut the frayed parts off. So overall, just not a great experience and not something I'd expect people without bicycle repair knowledge to do. I did email Sizzlebk about all of these issues and they did respond, but only after I had already figured it out myself, and even then they didn't have solutions for everything. I may have just gotten a bit of a defective model or something, like I said, since I did watch other reviews of this bike and I haven't heard people complain about it. But that's my experience and I don't want to hide that in any way. However, if you can get past that assembly process, you get rewarded with a pretty good bike. So now let's go over all of the features. Starting with the price, this bike currently retails for $1,199 US, which is a great price on its own for an e-bike these days. But my discount code brings that down to $1,099 US, which is amazing. The bike only comes in one frame size, which fits riders from 4 foot 11 inches to 6 foot 3 inches. So super wide range there, which is mainly possible because of the very long seat post. So it can actually get really high up there or super far into the frame as well. The bike itself doesn't look too bad. Cargo bikes are usually function over form, but nothing bad to say here. It's got a small logo on the side, nice logo on the front, and just some minor orange decals on the sides, and the S320 logo on the bottom side. Not sure why it says electric bicycle on the side. That's the only weird logo, I'd say. And I do like the almost trapezoidal shape of the seat tube. Interesting design choice that makes it a little more unique. Sizzlebk claims the bike weighs 75.18 pounds, which is super heavy. For a cargo bike, that makes sense, but it's still an aluminum bike, so I put it on my own scale at home, and it does actually weigh right around 75 pounds with the battery and the rear running boards. Regardless of that weight, it still doesn't feel super heavy, maybe because it's a smaller bike and relatively easier to pick up. But it has a max weight capacity of 500 pounds, which is really impressive if that's accurate. The frame has a center mount kickstand, which is essential for a cargo bike since it keeps your cargo level. This one is not the most stable actually, since it likes to sit at an angle on the ground and not completely flat, but it works well enough to keep the bike up, so no big issue. And underneath the frame, there is a hole for some cables and wires to come out. Unfortunate that some of these wires are exposed to the ground and the weather, so hopefully these stay intact. And of course, one of the biggest features is the rear rack itself, which, as you saw in the assembly, you do need to put on with some bolts. Now, interestingly, the rack itself says 25 kilograms max, which is about 55 pounds. So I checked in with Sizzlebk to see what that's about, since the bike is supposed to have a 500-pound carrying capacity. And they just told me that it refers to attaching a child seat on the rear rack. But from my experience, it seems capable enough to handle the weight of an adult without flexing or braking. But yeah, something to keep in mind. I do like how this rack has plastic covers on the sides to protect your clothes and legs from getting caught in the bike components. And the rear seat pad is actually super long, which is nice. These rear seats on cargo bikes in general never have as much padding as I'd want, but relative to other cargo bikes, it's about the same. And one more main bike feature I'll mention is the handlebar, because it can actually fold down to make the bike more compact. It just has a clip on the side similar to a scooter, and then you can fold it down and out of the way. I originally thought this was a useless feature because it's not like the bike is foldable, so this doesn't really save that much space. But funnily enough, I've been using it a lot to get under low spaces, like in and out of my garage when I have the door halfway closed. And it does help a tiny bit when storing it inside, so I guess it can be useful. Overall, the bike looks nice and can definitely seat 2 kids back there. And on top of that, they also send you these running boards on the sides so your passengers can have a place to put their feet. And I love how sturdy and high quality these are, and just how large they are. They're definitely more than enough space for your feet, or enough space for 2 kids to put their feet on, which is great. And better yet, they even throw in the full-on rear children's guardrail that lets kids sit back there and not fall off the bike, which is awesome. So lots of good accessories for the price. The inside of this rear kids rack measures 19.5 inches long and 14 inches wide, and it's about 9 inches tall. Okay, but now let's talk about all the tech stuff. This bike comes with a 48-volt, 15-amp-hour battery that you can charge via the included charging cable on the side of the battery here, or you can use your included key to unlatch and pull the battery out to then charge it off of the bike. And this is a fast charger, so it only takes about 4 hours to charge, which is great. The battery is paired to a 750-watt motor with 90 newton meters of torque located in the rear wheel, and this allows the bike to have a max range of about 65 miles and a top speed of 28 miles per hour, which I did test and confirm. Now, this isn't the quietest or smoothest battery and motor combo out there, but it's definitely very powerful and fast, which you'll need if you're carrying a lot of weight on this bike. Moving up to the screen and controller, you turn on the bike by holding the power button on the left, and then you can see your battery life on the top left of the screen, pedal assist level below that, current speed on the right, and trip or odometer info on the bottom. You can increase or decrease your pedal assist level by clicking on the plus and minus buttons, and you have 5 levels to choose from. And then you can hold down the top right icon to turn on your front and rear lights. The front headlight is bright enough, but it has a strange shape to the light beam since there's a half circular section on the bottom and then this random rectangle in the middle, so I do wish the light was more uniform. The rear tail light is fine too, bright enough to be seen and flashes when you brake, so that's good for safety. And finally, you have a thumb throttle underneath the left controller, so you can push this down to accelerate the bike instead of pedaling, and it lets you get up to the full 28 mile per hour speed limit. Okay, now let's talk about the mechanical parts, starting with the suspension. This is the Zoom Macera suspension fork, not very high-end, but works well on this bike. It has 100 millimeters of travel, even though Sizzlebk on their website says 45 millimeters, but I measured it at 100 millimeters, which is better. It also has a lockout on the top, which is just a knob that you can turn to make the fork fully rigid, so you go faster in flat areas. Next up, we have the wheels. Now, I actually do like these. We have some coated steel rims here. They don't have normal spokes, which makes them impossible to true if they do get bent, but should be pretty strong and they look nice. And then we have Chow Yang branded tires on here that are 20 inches in diameter and 3 inches wide. So they technically are fat tires, but skinnier than some of the 4 or 4.5 inch wide tires we see on these bikes normally, which does make these more maneuverable and improves the handling a bit. Tread pattern on these is perfect for rough roads and light trails, so it's great for preventing flat tires. And the bike comes with full coverage plastic fenders, which get the job done, nothing to complain about there, besides the weird install of the front fender. For the brakes, we got Radius hydraulic disc brakes, which I've used in the past and they work fine. They do need to be bedded in well, but after that they work nicely. And they're paired to 180mm wide brake rotors in the front and rear of the bike for good stopping power. The brake levers on the handlebar are nice too. They feel durable and sturdy and have a nice grip material on the lever itself, which feels good. For the drivetrain, we have a 7-speed drivetrain, which is super typical on these kinds of e-bikes. We have a large front crankset with 42 teeth on the chainring for maintaining speed. And then moving back, we have a Shimano tourney rear derailleur. It's a lower end version of Shimano's already lowest end derailleur, so definitely not the greatest. But you can upgrade this when it breaks in the future. And if you're using the throttle, then it really doesn't matter. And this does have the derailleur guard that you have to install yourself, which is not the easiest task since you have to unscrew the main rear wheel bolt and not mess anything up there. But it does offer protection there, which I think is worth it since this bike is lower to the ground. And you have a freewheel for the rear gears back here, 14 teeth on the smallest cog and 28 teeth on the largest. So pretty narrow gear range, which isn't great if you need to pedal this bike if it dies, but it works fine for riding in flatter areas. And finally, back up to the handlebar, we have the shifter, which is actually a high point of this bike since it's the Shimano Altus shifter, which works great and allows you to shift up to 3 gears at once when going to an easier gear for quickly getting up a hill or something like that, so that's cool. And while we're up here, we can talk more about the handlebar. It's about 620 millimeters wide, so pretty narrow, but it doesn't feel unstable or anything, so it's good for this style of bike. It's super upright, like I mentioned, and you have the ability to bring it up or down a little bit via this clamp, so nice adjustability for sure. The cable routing in front is pretty messy, but that's kind of typical for less expensive e-bikes and not a big deal either. They did try to cover them up with some zip ties and cord wraps, so that's a good effort. And then the grips on this bike are okay. They have a harder rubber material that feels fine, but they move up and down a bit no matter how much you tighten them, so that's a little annoying since the whole point of lock-on grips is that they don't move. But honestly, while riding, it's not too noticeable, and the grips are cheap, so not a big deal if you want to replace them. And back here, the seat is not as comfortable, but not bad either. Kind of average, but once again, easy enough to swap out if you prefer. But yeah, that is it for all of these specifications and parts. Now let's get on it and give you my final thoughts. All right, riding the Sizzlebk S320 electric cargo bike. I have it on no electric assist right now, just using the normal gears. And I will say, you know, if this bike does die on you or something like that, it's not super hard to pedal. It is heavy, 75 pounds, of course, so going up hills is not the best. But if you're just riding on the road, this feels like a normal bike to me. Just a little bit smaller, of course, and as you can see, the seating position is just great. Like, I like the seating position a lot more than any other electric cargo bike or any other e-bike I've ridden in terms of just going on flat roads and things like that. Kick it up to pedal assist too. And I will say the riding position, you know, it's of course very upright, very comfortable. I basically feel like I'm sitting on a chair or like on like a moped or something like that. And yeah, no issues going up this hill. I can change gears to make it a little bit easier. Kick it up to pedal assist 3. Of course, I can use the throttle, make it super easy. On e-bikes, it is kind of hard to have a gear range that supports how fast the bike can go. And this one, you do feel it. Like, I'm pretty much always in the hardest gear here. And it's definitely, I have to pedal a little bit more to go faster. But that's no big problem. I think most people who are getting a cargo bike like this, I mean, it's not really the ideal bike for getting a lot of exercise. It's more for a function of transporting cargo, transporting your kids here and there. So you're probably going to be using the throttle and everything, especially when you have all that weight behind you. You can even knock it off of curbs if you want to, and it handles that fine because it has those big plush tires. Has the front suspension fork. Like, after you get over the official assembly and all the parts and all the little things that are like not ideal on this bike, riding it just feels great. Like it feels like a good, solid, normal bike. What I do like about this bike is that these foot pegs, or the running boards I should say, do go above normal curbs. I have ridden e-bikes where the foot pegs are a little bit lower and they'll scrape curbs if you're next to them. Of course, you gotta watch out for some other things like the kickstand there. I'm actually gonna move the seat up a little bit more to get a slightly better seating position on this thing. And that definitely helps a lot with being able to pedal this bike better. Now, one thing I will say about this bike is you're super close to the handlebars, so there's not a very long distance between you and the bars, which helps make it very upright. But you just got to keep that in mind since it does feel slightly more cramped than a normal bicycle would. And I will say, being a cargo bike, it's not really intended to go off-road. However, it does have the mountain bike or kind of off-roady tires on it, so you can go over rougher roads, potholes, and not have to worry about getting a flat. But since those are on there, we might as well take it on a trail test, and I can show you guys how it does here. And the funny thing is, despite being this big, heavy cargo bike, it still has front suspension, so that does help a little bit on smoothing out the bumps of the trail, but it's definitely not comfortable. But for a cargo e-bike, it's surprisingly planted on the trail. I wouldn't expect it to perform very well on trails, but you know, that little suspension fork up there and the tires do help kind of make it a more comfortable ride if you do need to go off-road, or you kind of end up going on some grass or something like that. Like, it'll handle it perfectly fine. As you can tell, I have some mixed opinions of this bike. I like the bike itself, just the assembly and unboxing and all that stuff was definitely a very difficult challenge that I think most people would be very annoyed by. At the end of the day, if you do find this bike on sale, sometimes I've seen it at almost $1,500, which I do feel like is a bit on the pricier side for this bike. It's still a very solid bike at that price point, but these days I'm seeing it around $1,200, $1,300, and then with my $100 off discount code, it goes even cheaper than that. At that price, I don't have any problem recommending it for sure, even despite those challenges in the unboxing and assembly. Like, if you're looking for a cargo bike or even a normal commuter bike that you just want to have the extra safety and flexibility of carrying some extra cargo back there if you need to ever, this is a pretty good one, and you have a fun ride on it. It's definitely pretty bouncy on trails like this. Like, that's not the intention of it at all. But on normal bike paths, it's smooth. The upright seating position I can't get over, and I can't stress enough how nice that does feel. Might want to get a better seat on there, but besides that, I do like most things on this bike. But that's it for my review of the Sizzlebk S320 Cargo. Thank you all for watching, liking, and subscribing. I'll see you in the next video. Have a great day today, and remember to keep biking out there.